Vertigo Nation. This is your host, Sean, bringing you another episode. Thank you for joining me. And this is being released on Father's Day, even though it is a little bit later in the evening. So, to all the dads out there who are joining me on the pod, happy Father's Day to you, and hope that you had an enjoyable day. My weekend for Father's Day, I have to say, was pretty kicked off to a pretty awesome start. I got to go golfing, which I didn't get to do much of last season, but my son Sean and I got to go hit the course on Saturday of Father's Day weekend and had a great time. Went out golfing in Oswego and played 18 holes. And I'm feeling it a little bit, I got to admit, as I'm recording this. I'm recording this on Sunday, so literally on Father's Day. And like I said, we got to go out Saturday, so yesterday. And yeah, it's been a minute since I've been out on the course, and definitely been a minute since I actually played through 18. Typically, when we go out, we play through 9, and and then call it a day, unless it's a tournament. Or like I said yesterday, we decided, hey, we've got plenty of time. Let's play another 9. So we went through and played another round, and I had a great time. The weather was absolutely amazing. Couldn't have asked for a better morning to be out on the golf course, which to me is the fun of being out there. Like, I do enjoy the game, but I'm not good at it. I fully admit that. I am not a good golfer. I get some lucky shots. Yesterday I hit a hole in 2. For me, that's pretty incredible. I don't think I've ever hit a hole-in-one, but I also haven't been playing that long. I've only been playing 3 or 4 seasons consecutively now. I've played on and off throughout my life, where I remember probably 10, 15 years ago, I had played and would go out a few times in the summer, and then maybe the next summer, not at all, and then maybe the summer after that once or twice, and then there'd be long droughts where I just wouldn't play. So I would want to say the last 3 to 4 years have been a little more consecutive about at least getting out a couple of times each season. But I've never had any lessons, none of that. I want to take lessons, actually. I do really enjoy the game enough where I think that I would invest in lessons and try to get myself to a place where I'm playing better. Um, I do have a tendency to have a nasty hook off my drive that I just can't seem to correct on my own, no matter how many YouTube videos and such that I watch. So for any golf pros out there, if you want to message me, I'll happily pay for lessons. I just also know that I get so busy that I just honestly forget, that it's a goal or it's a thing that I want to take care of. And by the time the weekend comes around, I'm like, oh shit, yeah, I did want to check into that, didn't I? But didn't do it. So, any golf pros out there, again, if you want to message me on Facebook, Instagram, whatever, hit me up. Email me, vertigopod@gmail.com. I don't know. I am more than willing to pay for some lessons to kind of straighten my swing out and get a little bit better. But I enjoy the game. And what I enjoy most is really being out there on a day like yesterday. Again, perfect day. I think they were actually originally calling for rain in the weather, reports and whatnot. But not a drop came from the sky. It was beautiful, sunny. Temperature was perfect. It was breezy. It wasn't hot. It was just a beautiful, beautiful summer day. So very thankful for that, and had a great day out there on the course with Sean. So, also want to plug again, Sean, if you're not familiar. He also does some podcasts. He does Maple Talks, which is kind of dormant right now, but you can always go back and listen to the old episodes. And he's currently doing a podcast called The Elbow Room, which is an MMA podcast. So quick plug for my son who's got those things going on. And to my other boys, who are out there, Matt Maddox is keeping busy with his music. Seth is doing some fund, what is it called? Crowdfunding for some movies that he's into, or from video game web series and such on YouTube. So he's been very much pouring himself into that. And Zach got a new motorcycle, so he's been out riding and kind of doing that. So kids are doing great. Gia doing her thing, listening to her Disney movies and all of her music. She's on an 80s kick. So yeah, it's been just a tremendous Father's Day weekend for me. So I think that covers everybody. Um, so And then, I don't know. Do I want to get into what's on my playlist now, or do I want to do it after the topic? I'm not sure. I think I'm going to do it. We'll do it after the topic. So I was thinking about a conversation actually that came up between Andy and I on a past episode. It was actually the episode that I had to take down. So Andy had this awesome idea, and I really loved it. And I wasn't sure if it would fly or not as far as releasing it because of copyrights and all of that stuff. So the quick and dirty is Andy and I did this episode where we each brought in a group of songs, and then we would play a portion of the song, and then we broke it down to what we thought the song meant. And it was everything from, there was a Zach Bryan song in there that was literally that he had written about being upset at his Verizon bill. He talked about these blood-sucking vampires. It was a great song. There was I can't remember all the songs that were in there, but there was some great stuff in there. And one of the things that Andy had brought to me was a rap song that talked a little bit about masculinity and about the role that men play in relationships. And for some reason, I've just really been thinking about that. Well, I know why, I think, because I've just been dealing with a situation where, it's tough to decide. So let me rewind. There's a saying that has come up on Vertigo, if you listen back to past episodes, where I say, and I've learned this from a mentor of mine years and years and years and years ago, but he said once to me, what we live, we learn. What we learn, we practice. What we practice, we become. And what we become has consequences. Now, a lot of people think about consequences being negative, but the truth of the matter is consequences are neither positive or negative. They just are. It's just that the consequence is just a result of a behavior or action. Now, if the behavior is negative or the action is negative, then most often the consequence is negative. If the behavior is positive or the action is positive, then again, most of the time, and there's always the what ifs, right? And we can do that. But most of the time, then, we can honestly say that the consequence then is usually positive. And so I just, for some reason, have been spending so much time thinking about this and thinking about it in specifics to being a guy and masculinity and experiences that I've had. I feel like over the past couple of years, there's been a buzzword on the internet of either toxic masculinity, or what I've also seen kind of tied to that is this whole Sigma male. And I don't really want to get into a debate of whether or not I feel like being a Sigma male is true, because I think the truth of the matter is when you can always gather facts that, again, they're opinions. It's not necessarily science related. And you can always grab opinions that are either pro or against. And so I don't really want to get into the argument of, do I believe that there is really such a thing as a Sigma male? Because the opinion will vary on the evidence. I have absolutely gone down the rabbit hole and read things on Sigma males on the internet where I've come up for air and said, yeah, I can get behind that. I think that that's true. I have also gotten behind the argument of against, and why Sigma males are really just another form of toxic masculinity. But then that begs to the question, what is toxic masculinity really? And I think all of us have different experiences and or answers to even that question. So I think for me, what I want to do is just kind of pull it back to the I. I want to talk a little bit about my personal, journey. I feel like I have been a guy. So I'm going to base this solely off of my own experiences and keep it solely on the I, like I just said. And to do that, I need to give you a little bit of history. Okay? So I grew up in a home that I think confused masculinity in a sense. My dad was, and this is always the tough part to talk about, right? Because for me, especially, my dad has passed, and he's been passed for quite some time, over 10 years. But it's hard, right? Because I also come from an era where it's like, God, you don't really want to speak ill against your parents, and I'm not speaking ill against him as much as I'm just stating my truth, my facts. So in no way is this meant to be damning to anybody. I just need to put it out there as like, this is what it is, and it is what it is. And I know that somebody once told me that that saying, "It is what it is," is the statement of an angry man, and I beg to differ. I think that there are very much cases where you can say it just is what it is, as an example of, this is the situation, and the situation is not going to change. My reaction to the situation is what will change, right? And so how I react to that situation is actually what's more important. So me saying it is what it is just understanding that the situation is just that. It is a situation that is neither good or bad, healthy or unhealthy. It just is. It just exists. And my approach to the situation and my reaction to the situation is what makes it. So I'm just going to leave that there. But, so speaking of my youth, I grew up, I feel like, very confused about what masculinity is. Um, I think that it's important to say that at first I am an adult child of an alcoholic. I think that means a lot in the sense of the mental health realm. So there were very much rules, and if for anybody who's grew up in a home with addiction, whether it's alcoholism or drug addiction, there are very much rules that everybody kind of falls into. First, everybody in the family falls into a role, not rule, but role, ROLE, right? And I think it's very important. And I encourage people, if this is the first time that you're ever hearing this, look into it. And there's some really good, now this is information that you can find a lot of because this has been researched for decades, decades and decades now. And so there's some really good information out there on, the roles that family members play in homes of alcohol and drug abuse and addiction. And so anyway, with that kind of said and prefaced, see, there's that ADHD mind coming in, right? Easter egg for another episode, maybe. So yeah, where was I going with this? So I grew up as an adult child. I am an adult child of an alcoholic, and so knowing that there are very much roles that family members play within that type of a household. And it's very much dysfunction and it's very much abusive and there's lots of things that go on. There was definitely emotional abuse going on in my household, along with other abuses. And, that will come out, I'm sure, as episodes roll out. But one of the things that I can say for sure is first of all, I was the only boy outside of my dad, right? So there's four of us, four siblings, and I was the oldest and the male. And I have three younger sisters. And so I guess I would actually love to hear their responses to this too, because this is something that I don't know the four of us have ever really got together and talked about. But I would love that opportunity. And in my own kind of journey of trying to find some self value and also trying, I think, to heal and just be a better person. I would love to have these conversations actually. But so I don't necessarily want to go into my role so much as I want to go into what I have felt over the years. Because I think I got to be honest, and even at my age now, I'm not sure what my role was. It changed, and I think that's very commonplace. But what I can tell you is I grew up with a very weird view, I guess, of masculinity. I mean, on one hand, there was my dad, who was a fairly big guy. He was over 6 foot tall. He had a presence about him that very much kind of like gave off that like that toughness. You know, he was a boomer. He was born in '47, and so I think there are definitely things that define him. He was a Vietnam veteran, right? Um, you know, so there was this toughness about him that just kind of emitted off of him. I think he was a very intimidating person. He also had a huge heart and was a big teddy bear in a lot of ways. Um, but the other thing that's really strange is I can't really tell you that I knew him all that well. Even though I grew up with him, I don't really know him. I don't really know his story, and I don't know a lot about him. So there's confusion number one, the identity crisis. I don't really know much, and I don't know why that's important, but it feels like there has been something missing in my life. Like there was a puzzle piece, like the puzzle is there, but there's a couple of those pieces that had gotten lost along the way. And so therefore I'm not quite sure what goes there, and that's the best way I can really think to put it. Um, Also, I think that there was experiences that I had as a child where I had very much felt like there was a stain, I guess, on my soul, for a lack of better. I don't know. I know that's quite dramatic effect, right? But I don't know how else to kind of say it other than there's this stain that I just can't seem to get rid of, and in a way, it haunts. And I don't know how else to explain that, right? So and the reason I'm kind of talking about all of this is because it goes into what my view of masculinity is, which I think has one changed obviously, but has also been very confusing because on one hand, as I'm telling you, my dad very much emitted this feeling of don't fuck with me, you know, and there very much was anger in my home. There was very much anger. We knew anger very very well. Um, so you know, I understand that feeling, which I think kind of goes into the masculinity thing because as I was a teenager in those formidable years and 20s, I very much was comfortable with anger. Anger, I had no problem with. You know, somebody wants to fight, that's fine. I'll fight. I have no problem. I have no fear with that. Anger, I understand. However, I also had this conflict in me emotionally that wasn't comfortable and didn't want to fight and really just kind of wanted to hide away sometimes from those conflicts. And so there was this conflict within me that was very uncomfortable because there was a part of me that very much understood that if I was mad or if I was angry, then the best way to I guess show that was through some type of violent outbreak, right? Whether it was breaking something, throwing something, or physically getting in an altercation with another person. But there was also this other part of my personality that very much struggled with that and felt like that was just not who I wanted it to be defined as, you know? Um, and how I just really wanted to just be at peace and also operated from a very emotional part of, I guess, my personality. And in my conversation with Kelly when she was here last and we were talking about ADHD, she had mentioned how ADHD is very much, people with ADHD very much operate from emotion. And so I can identify with that too, because there was a part of me that was like, sure, if I was angry and pushed to a limit, it was easy to allow that to explode. But really, there was a whole lot of underlying emotions that just weren't being dealt with. And I feel like I haven't even really dealt with them until recent. But where this all ties into masculinity is for me, I feel like I've had this really skewed view of like, okay, guys are supposed to be the ones that like, are supposed to be tough, ready to fight, ready to go to war in a sense, be a warrior. And that's very much one part of how I saw it. But then the conflict within me was like, but I don't necessarily feel like that. Like I very much would rather like talk out a situation and kind of say like, well, what's going on? Why are we here? Why are we in this environment? Why are you mad? Why am I mad? Or maybe we're not really mad. Maybe it's really something else because what I've learned over the years is that anger is just the tip of the iceberg. That's the emotion that's safe to show. That's the emotion that people understand and react to. But really, underneath all of that is maybe some fear, or maybe some embarrassment, or maybe some excitement or anxiety, or maybe, believe it or not, even a conglomerate of emotions. Can be happy about something, but being happy about something um, also leads to having a little anxiety about it. And then what kind of starts coming out is this gruff, grumbly kind of, feeling. And it looks like anger, you know. So these are all the thoughts, I guess, that I have been kind of struggling with. And again, understanding that anger is a feeling that is very much safe, I guess, as far as masculinity goes. But there are underlying things. But then with the underlying things, I want to talk about that too. I've also learned that those aren't always safe, right? Because if I become vulnerable enough with somebody to tell them, like, really, I'm just like scared of this situation, or anxious about this situation, or I'm embarrassed, or um, overwhelmed, or I don't know, put whatever. But yet, if I'm vulnerable enough to say that, then it's like, oh, you're just being a pussy, and it's like, okay. So there's very much this like battle of, I don't want to look like I'm weak, because that's not a comfortable place to be sitting in either, right? Because then it feels like, at least as a guy, right? Like, if I put out there that I'm weak, then that makes me vulnerable. And if I'm vulnerable, then people will attack those vulnerabilities. And so that goes right back to, then I guess I need to show this angry side and just be ready to fight. And I can give you some examples. I've worked in a lot of different careers, first of all, which I'm starting to learn about myself, maybe part of that adult ADHD. So that's the other kind of cool thing about vertigo, is there's this underlying self-discovery of, maybe this is what that is, and maybe vertigo really, and the ramblings of vertigo are really just all part of this, and this is the healing journey, right? And you get a sneak peek to that. But anyway, careers. So I've worked all over the place, man. I actually, when I first graduated high school, I think my true passion, and I've talked about this in past episodes, was I wanted to be a musician. And that's really what it was all about. But I was told that that just wasn't going to be an option. Like, you cannot do that, right? I just had this message that you cannot be that. Only elite get to do that. And no one ever supported the fact that maybe with hard work, or maybe with going to shows, or maybe, doing it, and maybe I would have never made it, but maybe I would have, I think I had the talent to. I just didn't understand what it took to get there. And I didn't have the supports either, which kind of goes into place with being an adult child of an alcoholic. Because again, if you look at the family dynamics that goes along with that, people were, everybody's in their role. And so there is no support system there, because everybody's acting out in this role. And so, anyway, I again encourage you to really go down and kind of investigate that for yourself if that's something of interest. So, sorry, allergy season. So, nose is a little bit plugged. Um, so anyway, careers, and so I've held a lot of careers. So initially, I wanted to be, like I said, a musician. And when I did graduate high school, um, I initially went to college, and I went to Onondaga Community College. Now, I really wanted to go for music, but what I ended up going for was humanities, which is basically like the 2 year degree at that time of being a social worker. Um, didn't do well in college at all. Had a hell of a time trying to, get through it. Hated school, hated being there. Didn't want anything to do it with it, so I quit. Quit school. Um, there were some other parts in there. Anger. Actually, I got to tell the truth. Um, I ended up leaving school because of an altercation, and the altercation looked bad on my school record. So it was in my best interest to leave school. So I left. I left OCC, and let's see. I ended up working for OCO, which is a human service organization. I had started out working with adults with disabilities. So again, a male in a caretaker role. And so that was my first kind of wrestling match with masculinity, right? Because I'm in this role where I'm a caretaker. And of course, being a caretaker for other adults, especially adults with disabilities, right? That was very much seen at that point in time as a more feminine role. And so, of course, there's all of the, you know, what is the stereotypes and such that go along with that, right? And so I felt in some ways that that kind of made me act out more aggressively at times. I think that that was a point in my life where I really was trying to struggle with that whole identity of who I am, right? Being a male, early 20s, um, real early 20s, like literally 20, 21 years old. So just 20, actually. And in a caretaker role, again, that's deemed as more of a feminine role. And, trying to really kind of wrestle with that. Now, I had a great career with OCO, and I learned a lot working for OCO, and they gave me a lot of opportunities. And I didn't end my career with OCO, just being a caretaker. I got the opportunity to work in many different facets. I was with OCO for like 10 years, and but and this is how long I struggled, I think, with this whole masculinity thing without even realize that I was struggling with it, because I changed roles within OCO multiple times. Like I said, I worked with adults with disabilities. I actually worked for the rape crisis and domestic violence program within OCO for a while. I worked with youth services, and ended up ending my role as a supervisor within OCO. So, worked all over the place, did a whole bunch of different things, but all of those job changes within OCO, although I was still within one company, was really me wrestling with, one, who am I? Like, what is this? Like, I don't really know where I fit in, and I've always had this feeling of not sure where I fit in, wrestling with all of these things, of like just all the stereotypes, all the bullshit that comes along with that, all of that. So I ended up leaving OCO and went into working in addiction services. So I think that's when I really because the first thing I learned when I got into addiction services is nobody becomes a counselor because they want to counsel other people. Most people end up in that social worker role because because part of it is you want therapy for yourself. So I would say by the time I got into being an addictions counselor is the first time that I really started to address issues within myself, because I realized I needed to not only, talk a talk, there was a walk that I had to do. I am very much about the person that I am very much about, like, I want to be real with people. And I cannot sit across from somebody giving them advice and listening to their story of struggle with addiction and mental health and whatever, family, all of that stuff comes into it, right? And I can't do that if I'm not real with myself. So I do pride myself on that within me. So it really did force me to say, well, if I'm going to do this, then I need to fix some things within myself also. And so it very much was a path of, and I think that's where it kind of started. That's where the change in me kind of started, because I said, if I'm going to do this, then I got to do it, and I got to do it like all the way. And that's really when I started to kind of really wrestle with a lot of this stuff. And by this time I was probably 30-ish. Yeah, definitely. But you're going to see as I tell you the next part of this. So I worked within, addictions for a little while, and then I did a 180, and I went into the oil field. So I left this caretaking role and really jumped, head first into a role that was very much filled with masculinity, right? Leave caretaker, went into slam and iron together and like working with the quote unquote the bros. And listen, I loved my teammates at we got along well. And what I noticed from that position, what I noticed from working in the oil field is that even though that was the guys, right? Those guys that I worked with were like tough son of a bitches, man. But I had learned something that we all like had this thing where we wanted to be vulnerable because, after a long job, you're tired, you're exhausted, you've been out in the field for 12, 14 hours, like in the field working 12 to 14 hours. Now you've still got to drive your equipment back to your yard. And sometimes that was another 2 hours of driving. And so you're paired up in trucks and you've had a long day and you're chatting with one another and you really start to learn that we're all in this like weird tilt-a-whirl ride together of ebbs and flows and whatnot and spins and whatever, right? That we're all in this thing together, that really there's a vulnerability that we all share. We're all sharing feelings at the end of the day, you know, not anger. I can think of multiple times. There was a story that I told in the episode with Andy Carter where it was the Grinch stole vertigo. In that episode, Andy and I talked briefly about a scenario within the oil field, and I can think of so many times when you almost have to prove to your brothers that you have this toughness. Like if they're gonna, if one of the worst things, man, when you walk into um, a place with a bunch of your buddies, you got driller's mud all over you. You're tired. You're dirty. You just want to get a bite to eat and maybe something cold to drink, right? And everybody's staring at because people are very, very passionate about their beliefs. And when you are in a field like the oil field, you are hated or loved. There's no in between. There's no in between. And your brothers want to know that if you walk into a place where you're hated, that you've got their back, And so there's this hazing that goes on within that. And that's very much, I guess toxic masculinity, I guess, now that I'm kind of rethinking about it, right? But this whole struggle, but I think in a sense we all wanted to be vulnerable on one hand, but so then so there we go. So I'm struggling with this masculinity thing, right? And I work in the oil field. I leave the oil field. I go into the union. I was in the painters and tapers union, local 38 out of Oswego, to my brothers, and and again, very much a masculine role, right? But again, what I observed was, as much as we all had this exterior toughness, when you really got down to the nitty gritty, when you really got down to knowing some of your brothers, you started to understand that they also had this longing to be maybe a little vulnerable too. And so again, though, struggling with that vulnerability, right? And then I look at it from a societal point of view. So there's my experience, right? And then I look at it from a societal point of view, and I start to understand some things differently, right? Like there's definitely a cry for from men and for men to maybe be a little bit more vulnerable and be able to say, and we know this from a mental health standpoint, that like we can't just shoulder it all. And we know that men's life expectancy is lower than women's. And a lot of that is because of the emotional stress that we keep to ourselves. We suffer in silence. And because even though society says, hey guys, you're allowed to talk about your feelings, and we know that you need to be able to do that. And even though that there are places where that's acceptable, the overall societal, I don't think, has really changed much. And that it's still very awkward to feel vulnerable. At least that's my experience. And so this is just, like I said, what I've kind of really been thinking about is just how to react, because there's a part of me that feels like people understand when you react with anger. And coming from a guy, it's almost expected. But I can also tell you how uncomfortable that is, and that sometimes I just want to say, like, I'm hurt over the situation, or I'm embarrassed over the situation, or I'm whatever. And I don't know. I don't always feel like it's safe, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, in society to do that. So I feel like that's kind of what encapsulates us, right? It's still okay to be like that tough guy, I'm going to bust your ass kind of thing. But it's not always okay to be like, well, I'm just really sad today, even though that's what the truth is, I guess. So I just feel like there's this lifelong battle, at least for me, that I've been fighting on how to be the best me, how to be the best Sean, and wanting to change, but also struggling with how that looks. Um, I could think about so many times I think, and where it's like I do the should haves, right? I wish I stood up and did something different here. I wish I did fight here. I wish I didn't fight there. I wish I don't know, man. It's just like this weird dichotomy, I guess. I don't know. It's just this internal struggle. I'm not really kind of feeling like what's the right way to do this, and maybe that's the thing. There is no right way, but what I want to go back to is my original statement where I said, what we live, we learn, what we learn, we practice, what we practice, we become, and what we become has consequences. Because I want to go back and tie that into this for me. I grew up learning that anger is very much a safe emotion to show. Fighting is very much okay. And as a male, I should exude some kind of toughness, right? I mean, and my life kind of aligned with that in some ways. I was a wrestler in high school, and even though I wasn't the best wrestler, I enjoyed it. I didn't realize how much I enjoyed it until really later in life when I began to miss it. But I did enjoy it. And again, I wasn't the greatest wrestler. I really wasn't. But I could have been. I just didn't know. Yeah, that's a whole nother story for another podcast. And then later in life, I got into boxing. Love it. So there's definitely that part that I fed that, like, I have loved that. I love combat sports. I wish I kind of knew that when I was younger, because I think then I would have had an easier time, because I could have put that anger and that stuff there, I think. And maybe, I don't know, I don't know. I guess we can't do the what ifs and the should haves and whatnot. Just thoughts, just passing thoughts. So, but for me, again, what did I learn? I learned a lot about anger. So I've lived a lot of anger. And that's been a sad existence, I think, overall. And now I'm in a phase where I'm trying to learn how to shed that anger. And man, that feels hard sometimes, because I feel like the harder I buck against it, and the harder I say, like, I don't want to be angry. I feel like situations just really tie you to that, right? I just feel like the more you try to change, the more it's in your face, and that makes it difficult to change. So what I've lived, I've learned. What I've learned, I've practiced. I've definitely practiced anger. And that's not always good, right? Because that definitely, even though I have no criminal history or anything like that, I definitely can say that I've been embarrassed by some of my reactions throughout my life. My kids have definitely seen me in altercations, and I can't take that away. And it comes up at family gatherings at times. Oh my God, Dad, remember when you approached the neighbor about, It's like, I do remember, and I wish you didn't, I guess, because I wish that I could have handled myself differently in that situation. But I didn't have the maturity at that point in time to do it, you know? Um, so, and then I got to think about, well, God, what did I teach my kids? What did they live and learn? And what are they practicing now? It's weird how you get reflective as you get older about that kind of stuff, and you can't take it back. But what you can do is demonstrate a different side of you, I guess. And that's kind of where I'm wrestling with all of this now, is it's time to show a different side. But I don't know that I feel safe doing that either. I mean, sure, I do in some components, I definitely know that in my relationship with men, I'm very, very, very grateful in the fact that I can be vulnerable there. But boy, do I struggle being vulnerable outside of the four walls that are my home or whatever, And so hence vertigo. So what we practice, then we become, and what we become has consequences. And that is true, because when we are so, you know, I feel like anger is a fire, right? And every time that anger arises, it burns up a little bit of us. And you can't get that back. You can't get that back. And so the longer that goes on for, you just kind of become like this angry shell. And I refuse to be that. I refuse to allow that to be what my defining moment is. So now I've got to back up and I've got to relearn. And in a way, that means I have to relive. I have to relive some of those past things in my life and think about and talk to that inner child and tell them, like, no, we handled it the best we could at the time, but I've got it now. And there's a different way and a better way that we can handle it. And I'm going to take the reins from here and not let that inner child rage. And I'm going to get in touch, I guess, a little bit with those vulnerable emotions and kind of like try to sort that out so that I can then become a different person. And so that my consequences can now be different. My consequences don't have to be guilt and or shame of how I handled situations. But instead, I can look back and say, I did that the best that I could do it. And even though maybe the outcome isn't what I wanted, I know that I put my best foot forward and didn't succumb to the situation, you know? So I guess that's my thoughts for the day. I'm going to leave that right there, I think, for now. I could ramble and continue, but I think it would just be that. It would just be rambling at this point. So I'm going to leave that there. So let's go into the next segment of Vertigo and what's on my playlist, right? This is the most exciting part. This is the part where everybody's really been waiting for. What's on my playlist? Sean, what are you listening to these days? So I have been in I've been going back and forth, actually. I brought up my buddy Andy, and a matter of fact, I still share, after we recorded that episode, and I never finished what happened with that episode. We did that episode, and we posted it. And then what happened is YouTube and Spotify both blocked it because they do a scan for copyrighted content within a podcast. And so because there was other artist content within my podcast, like I said, we did play bits of the songs. We probably should have just mentioned the artist, the song title, and then read through some of the lyrics, and it would have stayed up. And so we're probably going to have to re-record that episode doing that. But it ended up getting taken down, and I got an email, stating you basically are using copyrighted content, and that's a no-no, and we are not posting this. And so, we can block your account or you can take it down. And so I chose to take it down. So where was I going with that? So that's kind of where that went. But Andy and I have had some great discussions and look forward to having some other, great discussions. And, I just want to thank you, sir, because you kind of helped also bring this out on this podcast. So if you're listening, thank you. And I hope that you and I can have a more in-depth conversation about all of this. And I kind of forgot what else I was going to say about that, but that is that. Let's see. What's on my playlist? Oh, Ghost. I've been listening to the new Ghost album, Skeleton. I'm absolutely just over the moon about that album, man. I think that album is absolutely incredible. The ebbs and flows in the range from the music to the lyrics, incredible album. So if you're a hard rock fan, and looking for something to listen to, Ghost, Skeleton, that album is absolutely incredible. Now, where Andy came up, I still text him songs and things from that interview, or from that from that podcast. And one of the things that I have shared with him was this song "Whiskey" by Trampled by Turtles. So I have also been on a little bit of a bluegrass kick. So I've been listening to a lot of Trampled by Turtles, who I don't know what it is about them specifically, but I love their music, and they're definitely worth checking out. So if you're a bluegrass or folk, Americana fan, Trampled by Turtles is definitely a band that you should be checking out. I think that they are definitely worth it. And their music is just fun, right? There's something about bluegrass music, especially the upbeat songs, not the ballads, but the upbeat songs that are just fun, man. There's this just emotion of like, well, it just feels good, So Trampled by Turtles has definitely been on my playlist as well. Even though the song "Whiskey" that I referenced is a ballad, it's not a very upbeat song, but it's so well written, and that was kind of my point in sharing it with Andy, is that it was just such a well written song that I just had to share it. But yeah, Ghost I think has been kind of more the dominant force and just really listening to them. So that's what's on my playlist. And thank you for hanging out with me for the last 40 minutes plus. I really appreciate it. Thank you for giving us a listen, or me a listen. I should say there is no us. It's just me and the microphone today. Indy didn't even join me in the studio today. She decided that she wanted to stay in bed. So she's over in the house and probably still sleeping. Good for her. But Vertigo Nation, thank you so much again for the continued support. I appreciate all the listens. I appreciate everybody, just the support. I appreciate it. I'm just going to say thank you. I'm going to cut it there and not go off into some long tangent of whatever. So thank you. If you're new here and you have not yet subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I guarantee that if you're liking this episode, the past episodes and future episodes will not disappoint. As always, as promised, yes, there are guests coming. It's not going to just be solo episodes forever. I do have guests that are scheduled to come back, and I'm working on scheduling more. So if you want to be a guest here, just hit me up at either Facebook. You can private message me. You can message me, whatever you feel comfortable doing. You can also email me at vertigopod@gmail.com. So with all that being said, Vertigo Nation, thank you. And I hope this episode made your head spin. Take care.